The Shadow People. Daniel had always been a night owl. He loved the quiet solitude of the late hours, the way the world seemed to slow down, and the shadows grew long and dark. It was during these hours that he felt most alive, working on his art projects, reading, or simply enjoying the stillness. But recently, the night had begun to feel different. The shadows seemed darker, the silence heavier, and a sense of unease had crept into his late-night routine. It started with small things. Daniel would catch glimpses of movement out of the corner of his eye, only to find nothing there when he turned to look. He dismissed it as his imagination, the result of too many horror movies and late nights. But then the whispers began. At first, they were faint, barely audible, like the wind rustling through the trees. But soon, they grew louder, more distinct. They seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, filling his apartment with their eerie murmurings. He could never make out the words, but the tone was always the same, dark, malevolent, and mocking. One night, Daniel decided he couldn't take it anymore. He grabbed a flashlight and decided to confront whatever was haunting him. He walked through his apartment, shining the light into every corner, every shadow. But he found nothing. Frustrated, he returned to his studio and sat down, trying to focus on his work. As he leaned over his drawing, he felt a chill run down his spine. Slowly, he looked up at the wall in front of him. There, cast by the faint light of his desk lamp, was a shadow. But it wasn't his shadow. It was a figure, tall and thin, with elongated limbs and glowing eyes. It stood perfectly still, watching him. Daniel's heart raced as he stared at the figure. He wanted to scream, to run, but he felt frozen in place. The shadow didn't move, but the whispers grew louder, filling the room with their sinister chorus. They seemed to be speaking directly to him, revealing his deepest fears and darkest secrets. "You can't escape us," they hissed. "We know everything about you. Your failures, your regrets, your fears. We feed on them." Daniel's mind raced as he tried to understand what was happening. The figure on the wall remained motionless, but its presence was suffocating. He forced himself to move, grabbing his phone and calling his best friend, Mark. "Mark, you need to come over." "Now," Daniel said, his voice trembling. Within minutes, Mark arrived, his face etched with concern. "What's going on, man? You sounded terrified." Daniel explained everything. The shadows, the whispers, the figure on the wall. Mark listened, his expression growing more serious by the minute. "I've heard about this," Mark said quietly. "They're called the Shadow People. They follow you, whispering your darkest secrets, feeding on your fear. Some say they come from another dimension. Others think they're spirits trapped between worlds. But one thing's for sure, they're dangerous." "What do we do?" Daniel asked, desperation in his voice. "We need to confront them," Mark replied. "Show them we're not afraid. They thrive on fear, so if we can stay strong, maybe we can drive them away." Together, they scoured the apartment, turning on every light, illuminating every shadow. The whispers grew louder, more frantic, as if the Shadow People were angry. But Daniel felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe they could fight this. As they entered the bedroom, the temperature dropped sharply. The whispers became a deafening roar, and the shadows on the walls seemed to writhe and twist. Daniel and Mark stood their ground, refusing to be intimidated. "Leave us alone," Daniel shouted. "You have no power here." For a moment, the room fell silent. Then, the figure from the studio appeared on the wall, larger and more menacing than before. Its eyes glowed with a malevolent light, and it began to speak, its voice a chilling whisper. "You cannot escape us, Daniel. We are always watching, always waiting. Your fear sustains us. Your secrets belong to us." Daniel felt a surge of anger. He was tired of being afraid, tired of letting these creatures control his life. "No," he said firmly. "You don't control me. I'm not afraid of you." The figure recoiled as if struck, and the whispers faltered. Mark stepped forward, joining his friend. "We aren't afraid of you," he echoed. "You have no power here." The room seemed to tremble, and the shadows writhed violently. But Daniel and Mark stood their ground, refusing to give in to the fear. Slowly, the whispers began to fade, the shadows retreating. With a final, furious hiss, the figure on the wall vanished, and the room was plunged into silence. Daniel and Mark stood there, breathing heavily, the adrenaline still coursing through their veins. Did we do it?" Daniel asked, hardly daring to believe it. "I think so," Mark replied, a smile breaking across his face. "I think we did." Over the next few days, Daniel felt the oppressive atmosphere lift. The shadows returned to normal, and the whispers were gone. He could finally sleep peacefully, the sense of dread that had haunted him dissipating. But sometimes, late at night, Daniel would catch a glimpse of movement out of the corner of his eye, or hear a faint whisper on the wind, and he would remember the shadow people and the darkness they brought with them. He knew they could always return, waiting for another moment of weakness, another flicker of fear. And so, he remained vigilant, never letting his guard down, always watching the shadows. Because he knew, deep down, that the shadow people were never truly gone. They were always there, lurking in the darkness, waiting for their chance to strike again.